Hello, hello. I can see that people are already ticking in, which is great. So, welcome to this live streaming about the SCA's new CVA or um, Coffee Value Assessment System. And of course, that's a pretty big topic. So, it's a bit bold to kind of say something about it these days. It's a pretty hot topic, particularly now that CQI has officially gone into the same methodology. So I'll just double check. It seems like there's a bit of a problem with the stream. Just a second. Live. Yes, it works. It's just Readstream that had a bit of a hiccup. All right. So we'll continue. So if you can just confirm for me that the video is working and the sound is working, because in my Restream app it seems like it's yeah, I'll just check. So could somebody just confirm that the sound and the video is working? Because then I'll just go ahead with the presentation. Sound is low. Yeah, I actually noticed that in the beginning. I'll try to talk a bit louder. I don't know exactly how to change that. Perhaps I can do it here. No, I will have to go ahead with this, and I'll need to check that another day. But perhaps you can turn up the volume your end. That would be great. Great. So yeah, the presentation, the front page, I've changed to this, and it's some of the visuals that I use to I would say point to some really deep points when it comes to understanding what's going on and what my problem is with these what I call overcomplicated systems. So as you can see, there are paper piles, there are tooth fairies. Of course, that's referring to some kind of superstitious world, vague superstitious world. There's also putting hats and glasses on classics. And then there are some points about overcomplication and simplicity, and that form follows function. That you can see that's the star that you want to put into a square that doesn't work. It's very important that there's a nice relationship between what you want to do and the concepts that you are using, trying to achieve it. And then you can also see the kind of the multi-tool that does a lot of things, but nothing really well. So let's take it step by step. And sometimes people think that I'm a bit, I don't know, that it's a bit hysterical. Why being so critical all the time? And sometimes people think that I'm personal, that I'm going after people, but that's not the case at all. So it's simply because CoffeeMind's mission is to help coffee roasters, that's our main audience, build purposeful businesses with sensory-proven methods and clear systems. And the sensory-proven methods, that's the science part, right? And it's difficult to have clear systems if your elements in your systems are not very clear as well. And it's very difficult to build a purposeful business if the models that you are using are not flexible to your situation. And this is where form follows function. It's very important that that these big organizations are coming with methods where you can plug in your business plan and then you can hit the ground running, rather than kind of trying to understand overcomplicated models. So that's the first point. And the purpose of this presentation is to help you build a respected roastery. And I know that this is the SCA CVA, but this is where it kind of rubs against CoffeeMind to get these big systems out there, kind of as if they are also useful for roasters, where they are actually not. And who knows who they are useful for, actually. And we want people to have these roasteries reflect your personal passion and purpose. And this is why it's important to have simple models with no assumptions that is not aligned with your passion and purpose, because otherwise they are not helpful. And we want you to do all this without getting stuck in pseudoscience, confusing advice, and overcomplicated systems. So the thing that everything we do in CoffeeMind evolves around, and what this presentation is also evolving around, is that this one belief, which is that sensory proven facts is your rock solid path to become a confident and respected coffee roaster. So the proven sensory facts, that's really your safe ground for not wasting the time, your time, and aligning what you do up against your purpose. And you can do this. It's only rock solid if you are following proven sensory science, not pseudoscience. That is something that SCA and CQI has been rolling out for 20 years now. And before you kind of let go of all this, the concepts that are dragging you down, it's difficult to really roast with confidence and build purpose and really respect yourself and have somebody else respect you. Out long pieces of paper without really understanding what's going on. So that's just to kind of explain why this is something that really goes against CoffeeMind's fundamental methodology, and why it's really difficult to just kind of accept it as it is. So for those of you who doesn't know CoffeeMind, you can see here it's CoffeeMind is primarily me and Ida, who's been working. We've been working for more than 10 years on really integrating sensory science with roasting methodology, and we are teaching coffee roasting and sensory analysis, and we are doing that with through our education and consultancy services, and we are using science as our vehicle. And just if you don't know us, we've been, since 2007, we've been teaching more than 2,000 individuals in small groups of 6 to 8. So we've been teaching a lot, and we've consulted a lot as well. And we've done more than 13 scientific research projects and published more than 15 scientific papers, or 15 when the ones that are in the pipeline are finally released. If you are not already following our podcast, I would highly recommend you to do so. That's a lot of free education where we are fleshing out all our concepts. And really, I would say that if there's anything we are proud of in CoffeeMind is that we haven't come up with a single thing ourselves. We are just applying science as it has been kind of taught and fleshed out since Plato, where the methodology behind data generation and learning, or knowing, is really at the core. So what method is used in the fundamental aspect of what we are investigating? So there's a lot of free education there. Okay, so I told you that sensory science is the vehicle, or it's the lens that we see everything through. And if you feel that CoffeeMind is kind of helpful, or if you feel that CoffeeMind is providing valuable education and consultancy, it's only because we are doing exactly this. You can see on this this page basically, or this slide explains exactly what we are doing and why, and also what that goes with everything we're doing. So from this slide, of course, we can also derive our critical approach to SCA's new CVA system. So you can see here, in sensory science, we have 3 questions, and they are asked in a sequence for good reasons. The first 2 questions is questions that you are asking in the lab. In the lab, basically, if you want to explore some samples, it could be roast degree samples, it could be drum speed experiment samples, it could be same coffee grown at different conditions, it could be the different coffees grown at the same condition, it could be anything you want to know anything about. And the question is, from a sensory perspective, is there any difference at all? Because if there isn't, there's no reason to invest in describing the differences and testing who likes what. So the first really interesting questions is about getting a sense of proportion here. What is a big difference? And that's the discriminative test. That's the triangular cupping, where you want to prove that an assessor is able to systematically point out the odd cup if the samples are compared up against each other in a triangle test. So that's the first question. The next question is, once you've proven that there's a relevant big enough difference, then you would like to describe the differences. And you are doing that in a descriptive test. That's kind of the gold standard of sensory evaluation. And this is what they claim the CVA is, and it's not that at all. It's very different from a sensory descriptive analysis, the forms that they developed. That's fair enough, but then just call it something else, because otherwise it's confusing. So that's a descriptive test. Once you know your samples in the lab, you know that the samples that you have has a big enough difference to be perceivable, that was tested in the discriminative. Then in the descriptive, you're describing the differences. So now you know your products. Next problem or next question is, who likes what? Because in sensory science, there's no such thing as an idea of universal quality. So this is just a concept that's not present in modern sensory science. So you know that people have different preferences, and this is where the next step is to check who likes what. And this is where sensory science cannot help you with building a business plan. The business plan is your personal dreams. Some people dream about serving the coffees they like to an audience. Some people dream about just making as much money as possible. Some people dream about cheating somebody who doesn't right now have the same preferences as them, but make some stepping stone educational products that will slowly teach them to have similar preferences as themselves. So this is something you need to make up. You need to make up your own mind when it comes to the business plan. Once you have a plan, then sensory science can help you navigate experimentation around the consumer segments. So you can see here, that is the fundamental 3 questions that you are asking in sensory science. Quality is nowhere to be seen. It's not that I don't believe in something of higher quality if something is rotten and not rotten, but there's no reason to kind of put that into a very rigid form, as if there's a universal quality score. That's just very confusing to kind of think that that's the case. So why do it? And you can see here, this can be done really low practically. It doesn't need to be very advanced or with a lot of software. You actually don't need software here. I mean, if you can prove, if somebody can taste or point out the odd cup in 4 consecutive triangles with a pairwise comparison, then that is enough statistically to prove that the person can taste the difference. So you can see, if you just know this, it's just 4 triangles, needs to be correct, then there's no need for any software or spreadsheets or anything. So, and you can use flavor wheels. Then if you've proven that there's a difference, you can just use flavor wheels to kind of do some kind of napping approach to the descriptive, so that you're just kind of placing the different cups in different flavor categories. So that's a very kind of good enough description in most cases. And you can see here in the preference question part of the of sensory science, you can just serve the 3 samples and see which thermo empties first. And the thermo that empties first is the winner. So you don't even need software here. You don't need advanced forms. But a very, very important point here is that the discriminative and the descriptive part, that is features or properties of the coffee, and the preferences is properties of the person, because now you know your product. So now the question is, how does my audience react to those? All right, so this is sensory science. This single slide is the lens that CoffeeMind sees everything through. And just some in coffee roasting, there's a lot of advice that would never pass the first test. Drum speed experiments, airflow experiments, rate of rise, small flicks on the curve would never pass the discriminative test. And also the whole organic acid identification, formic, acidic, lactic, glycolic, citric, malic, all of that we've proven in a scientific project that it's very unlikely that anybody can even taste the difference, because they are below sensory threshold and they are not different except for citric acid. But that's another discussion. But it seems like people are flocking around really vague small differences that would never pass the discriminative test and make it into the descriptive. So you can see how the discriminative is some kind of noise gate. It's a gate that keeps our education and consultancy advice free from noise. And what is noise? Noise is advice that doesn't make a difference anyway. So it's like giving advice to people. It's like giving a chalk tablet to somebody with a cold. Eventually they'll get well, right? So if you come up with some advice to people with a great quality green, it's not the advice that makes the coffee taste nice. It's just the green, right? So the noise gate is very important. That is the noise gate here is what will make, you can see here, that's kind of filtering or protecting us against pseudoscience, and also helps us kind of build on sensory proven method. So the fact that a method is proven means that the method has proven, if done, if executed in a sensory test, that people could taste the difference between doing the advice and not doing the advice. And it's very important that this is done blindly, because I've convinced hundreds of students about things that was in my early days that would never pass the discriminative test. As a trainer, it's very compelling to come up with fancy stories. And if you make a business around coming up with fancy stories, you're trying to avoid the awkward question, but does it make a difference at all? So there's a lot of things that has made it into our community wisdom that would never pass the first test. And this is so important to understand, that we need to kind of weed out all this nonsense advice, basically. And as you can see here, I'm just checking because I think, yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's just, I told you that you can do this without any scientific data at all, or any advanced statistical software, because the fundamental questions you are asking are very very simple. And but once you ask a simple question and answer them in a simple form, you get a lot of data. You could do just the flavor wheel and the triangle test, the flavor wheel, and the which thermo empties first, and that's perfect. You are still doing it scientifically because you respect the 3 questions, right? And only proceed to the next question once you've proven the first question. That's sufficient to be scientific. That said, if you really want to create good data, you get a lot of data, and you can do proper statistics. And here I've just shown you how that what that looks like when we do this in scientific studies. But just to make sure that you really understand that sensory science is based on really simple questions, and that kind of the obviousness of the different types of questions, I have a little thought experiment here where you can see you've got 2 samples. One which is roasted very lightly, that's sample A, that's Actron 100. Sample B is roasted very dark, it's Actron 50. And I hope you agree that this is a pretty big difference, and that the light roast will be high in acidity and low in bitterness, and the dark roast will be high in bitterness and low in acidity. I hope this is not too controversial to kind of claim that. So let's make just take some. Let's say that now there was just been an exhibition in the US. If we took kind of 12 random people at that exhibition and just made sure to calibrate them for bitterness and acidity with citric acid in clean water and caffeine in clean water, to make sure they know what acidity and bitterness is, we're pretty sure that if we ask them to raise your hand if sample A is most acidic, everybody would agree, because we are just asking about intensities. That is the descriptive part, right? But if we ask them which one they prefer, the same group of people might come up with a mixed answer, because personal preferences are very different from just measuring intensities. And so you can see that is the difference between the descriptive and the preference step in the question here, right? Because you can see the asking which one is more acidic, that's the descriptive, that's the second stage in this 3-step stage gate model. And the last, who likes what, that is measuring the preferences of people. So the same group of people can do both a intensity or a preference data set. And we wouldn't expect, we would need to ask both, because we never know who likes dark roast. And you can see here, I've noticed there's a language around overcomplication and confusion in sensory data. And it's 2 words. It's the unnecessary and wrong use of, well, it's subjective. So using subjective as kind of people are messy and you can't trust subjective data. There's kind of a wrong kind of suspicion around getting data from people. And the reason why it's wrong, because this is at the core of what sensory science solved 50 years ago. So things are not hazy or vague or non-scientific or just because it's sensory data. It's simply not true. So when people use subjective about sensory data, expect a smoke bomb of overcomplicated concepts just to kind of waste your time to get your money, sell you courses that are just overcomplicated and leave you as a follower, not a leader. So we really want to give people skills to become your own leader so you can make your own decisions. So you're not following somebody else's form or somebody else's curve. So using subjective or just saying that the Q system is a common language. It's not a language, it's a number. So it's pretending to be science where it isn't. So if it's language, you should call coffees, they should have names, they should have moods, they should have, it's a language is not just a number, but it's kind of just making it kind of throwing this smoke bomb that can so they can keep on dumping complexity on you without anybody really knowing what's going on. So because if you think about it from a sense, from a theoretical point of view or a theory of science point of view, the subject in knowledge investigation or in experiments, that is the scientist. The scientist is the subject, and using a method, and that goes back to Plato, using the correct method will give you objective data about the objects of investigation. And the object of investigation is people tasting coffee. People can report intensity data back. That's what you saw earlier, that people raised their hand if it was more acidic. Or they can give you preference data. Which one do you prefer? It's objective data because anybody using the same method on the same object, so the same group of people tasting the same coffees, will get the same data, get to the same conclusion. That's the whole point of methodology and sensory data. So subjectivity is not solving anything. That's one of the kind of smoke bombs that people can throw if they want to waste your time for money. All right, there's a separate if you follow the link to the podcast, there's a separate episode in the podcast discussing this. And when I did my thesis, I did it on meditation, science of meditation. And this is very important because in meditation, you've got much more complicated concept than intensity and preferences. But it was solved kind of using first-person data concept rather than subjectivity. Because if you're talking about first-person data, it's more reliable. It's something, it doesn't kind of cloud the methodology with a wrong word such as subjectivity. It's very important. And this is one of the core kind of smoke bombs that are thrown when people talk about sensory training, when they want to kind of exchange your time and money teaching you things. So in CoffeeMind, in our method, we are not talking about quality, but we are talking about suitability from purpose. And the purpose is derived from the business model. And the business model is something that our clients needs to. We can help them develop it, of course, but you need to plug in your personal passion and personal purpose in life to kind of derive a business model that you are willing to fight for 10 or 20 years, or how long time it takes to succeed in a business plan. So you can see here, it's much better to talk about suitability and purpose than quality, because that leaves the space for you to plug in your purpose into the methodology. So I don't want to tell people what to do. I want to tell people what methods to use to succeed with where they want to go. And you can see here, we've just derived this very simple form where people are basically just scoring intensities of the flavor categories. We've taken the flavor categories from our flavor wheel and made this spider web so people can kind of score relative intensities, basic taste, the purpose of the coffee, and then a few flavor notes afterwards for the marketing department. So if we are selecting green for a client, we would just bring these cards, and then we don't need to fill out all of them. It's more like notes. If a coffee doesn't have dried fruit, why waste time noting it? Just kind of make sure to note the relative differences between the samples and evaluate that up against the purpose of that product. Are you looking for a Kenya that has very clear blueberry? Then that's important to notice. If you're looking for a Brazil with very clear peanut flavor, then that's important to notice. Just but this is something that goes towards your business model and what you want to do with the product. Some people think that too much blueberry in a Kenya is too much. Then if you score very high on blueberry, that's low on purpose, because it's low on the purpose that of the product that you're trying to develop. So I think simple methods like this is much better, because you're not overcomplicating it, but you're keeping the focus on your personal plan for what you're doing. And you can see here, you can do some really simple descriptive analysis. So that's you can remember that that's the middle of the 3 steps on sensory science. Once you've proven that there's a big enough difference between the samples that you are evaluating, it could be a roast profile experiment, it could be a green coffee selection experiment, could be whatever. Once you've proven the difference is big enough, then you can do a simple descriptive analysis like this, where you're just basically tasting the coffees, giving them a number, throwing a card with the number of the coffee into the category that you think they represent, and then you can kind of find some specific notes for the marketing department if you want. But you can see you understand what you're doing. There are no assumptions here that you don't understand. At least that's what I hope. But you can see it's so simple, right? So just to kind of repeat, in sensory science, there are 3 stages. And the first is the discriminative. Is there a difference between the products in the experiment? The next is the descriptive. What characterizes the differences and how strong is it? And the third step is who likes what. That's the affective step. That does the difference have any meaning for the customer? Or you can also see of the different segments I can serve, who likes what. So that's the questions. And the answer is simple. You can see in a discriminative test, the simple answer is the selection of an odd cup in a triangle. In the descriptive, it's a series of random samples served. And here you're just scoring intensities. And in the affective, you are basically just leaving it to the customer to tell you how much they like that sample. So can you see here, it's a simple answer. Simple answers, that is what we want in science. All right, so now I'm transitioning to the part of the presentation where we are going into the CVA or looking into those forms. I just wanted to make sure, are there any questions this far or things you don't agree with? Do you have any comments? Then I'm looking at the chat, so you can just ask. I'm just checking if I know anybody. Yeah. All right. So if you have a question, please ask the question in the chat, and I will answer it live here. I'll just leave a bit of time for people to write. Otherwise, I'll just, if you have a question, please write it. There might be a delay. So I'll just go to the SCA CVA slides, and if I see a question, I'll just answer it immediately. Okay, so notice here, 3 stages, different simple questions, different simple answers. And the first 2 are answered in the lab, and the last is answered by the consumer, because we don't know what they like. And of course, as I said, you can collect this, because when you get a lot of data, it's nice to use some software to really get get a lot of data reported. So you can see here, this is the descriptive form and the effective form. And there's a lot of things here that springs to mind. The first thing is, it's really complicated. That's the first thing. It's if you just looked at this, right, and you can see here in the descriptive, there's here I just took an example with bitterness, and in a descriptive analysis, you would never assume that you know what descriptors to include to create relevant data. So every time you do a descriptive analysis, you start from scratch. And in that sense, it's a good idea to take the flavor categories of the flavor wheel. In this case, they've used the SCA flavor wheel. That's a good idea. But the problem is you cannot score the intensity. Another big problem is that you cannot score intensity of bitterness. That's a big problem because, as you saw earlier in roasting, the balance between acidity and bitterness is primarily what changes from light to dark, and that is a major kind of flavor attribute to track for different customer segments. Different customer segments react strongly to bitterness and acidity. Some hates bitterness, love acidity. Some hate acidity, love bitterness. So bitterness is such a fundamental feature of coffee. I can't believe they've released a form, been working on this for 5 years, and missed the point that bitterness is an important sensory feature or attribute to track if you want to track who would value this coffee at all. That's weird. And the effective form is completely overcomplicated. No consumer have any idea what this is. So it's just overcomplication. And overcomplication is really bad because overcomplication is something that throws off people completely. So you can see here the picture I have of overcomplication is the heliocentric and the geocentric model of the planet systems. So here you can see a theory doesn't need to be directly wrong to be advised against. You can see here the geocentric solar system is still something you can describe very precisely with mathematical formulas. So it's not wrong, but it's not something that you would advise because it could be said much simpler. And simplicity is better than complexity, even if the complicated model is not wrong. That's something called Occam's razor in theory of science. So you can see here, this seems like if you're comparing the simple answers you see in real sensory science with the answers that they have kind of asked us to fill out during a CVA session, it's very clear that they haven't kind of read up on Occam's razor before creating these forms. And another thing is that you can't just, you can see here, my problem with the effective form is that it looks like it should be scored by the consumer, and the consumer has no idea about anything. There's a concept in consumer science called naivety. A consumer is naive in the sense that they have no idea. The only thing they know is how much they like it or dislike it. That's what they know. They don't know anything. And in a consumer study, you shouldn't start teaching them because then they're not consumers anymore. So it's very important, just ask them what they like. Then you can have demographic data and try to capture other stuff, but the core piece of data you get is how much they like it. So asking the consumer has no idea what fragrance is, what aroma is, what flavor is, what aftertaste is, what the quality of acidity. A consumer has got no idea. Most consumers confuse acidity and bitterness. A lot of coffee professionals do as well. So this is completely out of line with sensory science to develop an effective form like this. It's completely no-go. It's not even close. Yes, they've used a 9-point scale, but then they've made something completely different. And this is where you can see here, it's very important in, it's something I've found in engineering, and sensory science is an engineering tradition, that you have clear, if you are creating a system, it's very important that each element has a simple, very clear function. So there are some concepts from engineering that goes across mechanical engineering, electronics, and even computer programming. And that's what this slide summarizes. But it's very important that each element is simple and has a clear role. And this is not, the effective form doesn't have a simple, clear role, because it's not, it can't be filled out by a consumer. And it's supposed to be filled out by a consumer. So my point is that sensory science was developed 50 years ago, and it's a classic at the level of Newton and Einstein and all the big scientists. So it's a classic for a reason. And don't think that you can improve the classics. And I think that the effective form and the descriptive form is a bit of an example of this, right? Somebody who thinks they are scientists but are not, trying to improve the classic sciences. So I've seen that there are some, I don't know if it's question. Yeah, so EN CVA is clearly not intended to be actually used for real coffee assessment. And then what's the point, right? So Veronica, I have a question regarding the classification of samples. How do you think we should do it without having a metric? The final score is not relevant anymore. I don't want to rely on scores, but I don't know how the big market will use from now. How do you think we should do it without having a metric? Classification of samples. I'm not completely sure what you ask about, but for me, I think it's important to give people methods that has a local reference point, not a global. So I'm against having global standards because they are typically irrelevant locally. I want somebody who creates a business anywhere in the world to have their own opinion. If they don't have their own opinion, that's what they need to work on. They need to understand the market they want. They need to have a plan, right? And plans don't work, right? So you need to iterate, but you need to have an opinion on where you want to go with your business. And then you need to have then you need to explore the local market, taste what is there, find a niche, take responsibility for kind of developing some product for that niche, and international standards will not help you because there are too much variation in what people like around the world. So I think that the flavor wheels are useful for kind of giving people an idea of the fundamental categories. And this is another thing. It's a good example of why standards are not very useful, because the SCA flavor wheel and even the CoffeeMind flavor wheel is cultural. People in the Arab world and in Asia would have different ways of categorizing flavors. So it's not that they are wrong, they are just culturally, and that's also something that they are aware about in the coffee lexicon. But I just haven't seen it being updated, or I haven't seen this being used. So I think that those flavor wheels are great, but I really want people to take local responsibility, and that's why I'm against these big kind of standards that are just wasting people's time. I don't know, Veronica, if I answered your question or if I understood your question, but if not, then please could you kind of deepen the question so I can see if I can come up with a better answer. Ian, you appreciate the presentation. I hope we recorded and shared. Need to leave some now for copying. Okay. Coffee roast address the issue. Okay. Okay, so Costas, you speak to the history of extrinsic and intrinsic factors in sensory science. I've only seen a paper from... So the whole extrinsic and intrinsic factors, I think that's great. But again, why do we have to kind of come up with a finite list? It can only be cultural. And okay, now I'll jump to a slide far down this slide deck because I actually have a model that I use that I've been using for years because I think it's highly useful. You can see there's a lot of... okay, just a second. Because again, I think the CVAs, it feels a bit like a school project because you can see here, it's not very deep philosophy, extrinsic and intrinsic attributes. Yeah, it's not that it's wrong, but it's just there's much more interesting things said about this than they do in the white paper. The white paper, they are not even really referring to philosophy or established theory of science. It's just like kind of a school project where they've made it coherent but not correct. So what I've always used, and Ken Wilber is one of my favorite philosophers, and he is trying to make it a bit more systematic. So he's talking about inner and outer and individual and collective aspects of things. So you can see here, a product or a business has got inner, outer, individual, and collective. So you can see here in this model, you've got the inner individual, that's psychology, thoughts and feelings. You've got the inner collective, that's group identity, tribe membership, ethics, culture. And then you've got the outer things, individual outer things, that's coffee tree, bean, roast profile, brew, cup, science, facts. So that's where we are normally aggregating as coffee geeks. And then you've got the systems. That's the protocols, the workflow, the recipes, the QC. So you can see here, they are talking about origin, certification, name of farm, brand, and so on. But I think it's a bit kind of messy. I prefer Ken Wilber's way of thinking about it because you can see they completely lack the systemic aspect of your product. If you have a product, it's very important to deliver on time. And it's very important that you quickly can see what they've ordered historically. So there's a lot of systems aspects to a business that makes it valuable for the customer. They don't have the systems part of it. So again, I think it's just it's just not high level science nor philosophy. They have a serious competency problem in the group creating this if they want to live up to the promise that they are doing best practices. They are not, and it's not just me saying this. It's because if you just scratch a bit, you just find holes everywhere. So this is my take on the whole intrinsic, extrinsic. It's not a bad distinction, but it's just too, it's not good enough. It's too simple, and it's not a best practice. Let's see here. So that was an answer to you, Costas. And we're going to use this diversity to markets. That's Veronica. Yeah, it's about. I don't know why SCA and the Q is so obsessed controlling people's way of thinking. They should liberate people, but it seems like they are trying to capture people. So that's why I think they are trying to create followers, where in CoffeeMind we are trying to create leaders, and you create leaders by giving them methods so that are not wasting their time, so they can expose their personal preferences and passions in their businesses rather than dragging them down. Anders Lorentzen, you're too late. We haven't talked about the SCA score yet because it's everybody left it now, really, the 2004 score. I think since the Q system now has adapted the CVA. So regarding bitterness, Declan, could it be because bitterness is kind of a no-go in this SCA mindset and therefore not taking into account? Well, if you want to have a model where you can create different products and track the value that people put on the different products, it's very important to assess the most important parameters, and bitterness is just too important from a consumer value perception perspective to leave out. Mohammed says, but at the end we have to grade a sample depending on the objectivity. How to grade a coffee without a calibration? In a concept like Cup of Excellence, how can they give a score to a coffee? So Mohammed, objectivity of what, right? So objectivity of preference data or objectivity of intensity data. And I think Cup of Excellence is something else than the Q system and the CVA system, because Cup of Excellence is a competition. And that's something else than an education system and the standards that are tried. Because, so in a sense, I wouldn't mind that the Cup of Excellence has a group of international judges that would kind of give their opinion in a score. Because in Cup of Excellence, everybody has sent the samples anyway, so they might be, okay, they scored it high, but it doesn't suit my market, so I taste it myself and I can make my own decision. So it's something else. And so my point is that there is no there's objectivity of preferences, but remember, preferences is data about a consumer segment, not the coffee. So you can have objectivity about people's preferences about a coffee, but there is no objective quality score that makes sense from a sensory science perspective. Then there's a LinkedIn user. I think my comment disappeared. Try again. I think with the SCA, we had a metric, even though it was imprecise. With the CVA, this is getting more difficult to use and lose some of its use as a metric. Yeah, and that's actually what I want to show you the next time, right? That I think that the new system, it's not that it's wrong, right? But because it's overcomplicated, it's inefficient. So you can see here on the left, I've got a scientist, a sensory scientist. And as I said, a sensory scientist has simple answers to simple questions. So they have some really simple tools, right? You can see that on the blackboard, right? It's very simple. Every tool has one specific function and only that. And on the right, we've got these overcomplicated forms that the SCA comes out with. It's not that they are completely wrong. You can still use a strain tool like this to put in some nails, but it's just not very efficient, and it's not doing a good job. But it's not completely wrong, right? It can be used for something, but it's not efficient, and it doesn't make a nice result. So you can see here on the left, right, the 2004 copying form and the new descriptive form. It's too overcomplicated. And you can see here on the right, that is CoffeeMind's descriptive, sensory descriptive software, where you can see you've got exactly the simplicity. You've got a cup, you've got a replicate, and it's scored on, in this example, 6 different descriptors that is specific for this session. If it's another session, you will have different descriptors. And that goes back to what we talked about, Veronica, that form follows functions. You can't make a form that suits all problems. And every time you do an experiment, it is an experiment that is derived from the needs of your local business. So any form needs to be flexible enough to only contain or only score the data that is relevant for the samples at hand in the current context. So that's why in our software, when we create a session, we need to specify from a clean slate what descriptors are to be included. And you can see here on the right, it's very easy, right? You are calibrated on the samples at hand for what is high or low bitterness. It's not a universal. We're not using any universal references here, because we are just using the most bitter and the least bitter samples in the session that we are about to score. Not universal bitterness score. Why would we? Wouldn't create good data. We only get good data if we only focus on the 6-8 samples at hand and try to kind of find the sample that has the maximum bitterness and least bitterness and try to score everything in between. It's very important, but you can see here there's no confusion with this interface. And also here we also have a consumer module in our software. And you can see here, if you are to score 4 samples in our software, there's a small instruction, and then you've got 4 samples, 4 sliders, 1 to 9. How much do you like it or dislike it? And if you were to score 4 samples in the new CVA system, this is what you're faced with. You can't give it to the consumers because they've got no idea what this is. And even if you are trying to do it on behalf of the consumers, you are falling into the trap that in sensory consumer science, the whole point is that you need to ask the consumer. You can't predict. You can try to predict, but that's much worse than just asking. So I don't know what this is. It's too complicated. It's not respecting fundamental distinction in sensory science, where the effective is left to the consumer, and it's overcomplicated. So it's just weird. Okay. Just checking. Okay. So Bob from Saudi. My personal thought, I'd make my own QC. Though I go off of the SCI score sheet, I go into details for my own clients as a consultant to what matter to the cafe. But for producer, there should be a common assessment language. Bob, yeah, the common assessment language, that would be okay. But I'm still thinking a bit like consumer and sensory science. We should, what SCA should do is to initiate a lot of consumer tests around the world to get an idea of where the different flavors are appreciated. This would make producers able to know where they would get most value for their products. So I actually think that kind of consumer data libraries would be much more valuable than these weird kind of languages that has been developed for many years. Okay, so now I've talked about all the problems. Now I would like to show you what we consider as the solution, and the solution is to not invent a thing. The solution is to just use sensory science as it has been developed many years ago. And I want to show you exactly how that looks like, because that's what we've done in CoffeeMind. So the last year, I've just developed our own software so we can run scientific projects. but also so that we can deliver to the community sensory science methods to give you personal feedback, like a hearing test, and also panel calibration, real sensory scientific calibration analysis of your colleagues or your local decision body. So your panel in your company. It's very important for you to know if somebody is struggling with even kind of tasting florality or ferment or nuttiness or berryness. Some people might struggle and you don't even know, and this can be exposed by the methods developed in the classical sensory science. And I'll go through, show you exactly how sensory science works, a descriptive analysis. So here, let's say we have 3 different samples. Those different samples are then split into triplicates. It could also be 4 replicates, if you, depending on the size of the session. But the whole point is that nobody can know what they're tasting. So we need to spread it out in replicates and randomize it. And then people are just faced with different cups, and they've got no idea what they taste. And they have their own personal randomized sequence through the samples. And they need to score all the descriptors, the same descriptors per sample. So in the lab, it looks like this. It's a very rigid setup. In CoffeeMind, we have developed the exact same methodology, but it is a scientific method that we are doing here, but it's in a much less rigid setup, but we are getting scientific data. And that's actually something that we have in for scientific publication right now, that this method is robust. And I want to show you a data set. It's actually a Danish crazy company. It's the boxes here. It's coffee grown in greenhouses here in Denmark. And we did some scientific data on those. So you can see we've got Robusta, an F1 hybrid, Caturra, Liberica, Brevibus, and an Ethiopian heirloom. So we got 6 different samples, and they were all scored on these 13 different sensory descriptors. And you can see here cereal and malt correlated with the Robusta. So this is actually scientific data on the flavor characteristics of each of these 6 samples. So this is something called a PCA plot. That's a bit, it's easy to interpret, but I can go into some slides that makes it easier to see the differences. So here you can see the spider plot, and you can see which of the descriptors had statistically significant differences. But most importantly, these plots will show you that, for example, that as the acidity descriptor, the Robusta was the only one that was different, significantly different from the others. So with these data, you can really see with statistical or scientific objectivity the intensity differences as scored by the panel. And we were 12 people tasting these 6 different samples, scoring 13 different descriptors. So there was a lot of data. But the most important thing here is that you can get some really scientific data about the intensity differences, and the statistics will assess whether the differences are big enough to be statistically significant. So this is top shelf sensory descriptive analysis. But what I really want to show you, because remember, this is what I just showed you here is properties of the individual samples. But the most important thing is every assessor tasted all these samples. Every sample was tasted 3 times without they knowing it. So we can actually get really interesting data about the assessor's ability to consistently score, use the different descriptors to consistently score each sample. So you can see here, for example, this assessor 280. This assessor is struggling with florality, because you can see this person, assessor 280, got the Brevibus sample 3 times, and once the florality of the Brevibus was scored 2, next time it was scored 6, and the third time this person got the same sample without knowing it was the same, the person scored florality 8. This is high variation. This is not good. This person is struggling using florality to score it correctly. So you can see here, but astringency, the person was spot on every time. All 3 dots on top of each other. So this is almost like the hearing test. You can see if this person is consistent, but you can also see if this person can repeat themselves. So this is what you get per assessor. So every person gets their own personal hearing test across these descriptors. And you can see here, all these slides are showing each person what they need to improve and what they struggle with. So you can see here, assessor 280 is struggling with florality and mold when it comes to variation. So this is almost like a personal hearing test for each assessor in the session. And that's very important because this is how universities for 5 decades have improved the quality of the data at the universities by training the panelists specifically. You can see this person is struggling with bitterness. Assessor 35 is struggling with bitterness because you need to have a low variation, that's on the x-axis, and you also need to have a low p-value. That shows that you are able to use this descriptor to differentiate the samples. So the last point here, and now we are soon ending this session, is that amongst the data that you get in a scientific sensory descriptive analysis is also a panel calibration, and this is highly useful for people with a business, with a panel where you need to be able to make decisions together. So here you can see which assessor, the assessors are anonymized with a 3-digit number here. You can see which assessor is deviating from the panel average. So you can see assessor 292 and assessor 295 is outside the panel average when it comes to bitterness. And you can see 292 is also outside when it comes to astringency. But when it comes to bergamot, then it's 255 and 280 that is outside the panel average. And when it comes to acidity, 280 and 282 is outside. So here you can kind of, if you have a group of employees who's making decisions, it's really nice for you to see per descriptor who is struggling. So the conclusion here is that scientific sensory methodology, as it has been done at the university for more than 50 years, is available at CoffeeMind's courses on the 4-day SCA Roasting Professional and the 1-day Sensory Performance that we're doing on site here in Copenhagen. So you can actually, as an individual or as a group in a company, you can go here and you get a full day with all the top shelf sensory methods to train panel at universities. It's a full day where you'll get an individual assessment and also a panel assessment if you are participating as a team. But the new thing is that we've now made this available virtually for people with an Ikawa or an Alu bullet. So if you want to join and get personal feedback or panel calibration feedback, you can now join virtually if you've got a bullet or an Ikawa. You just need a friend who is going to be my assistant locally at your place. So we are starting to roll these out. We've got some dates in June, and then in the fall semester, of course, we're going to do these frequently. So we are bringing sensory science to the community, and we are doing it we are not inventing anything ourselves. We are just doing it as it's been done at universities, And yes, we've created our own software to make it easy to do it virtually, but you will get state-of-the-art personal and panel calibration feedback if participating in these. And we've actually, for those of you who has been hanging out for this hour, I've created a special offer or a bundle. So those of you who didn't register, who just kind of saw the stream on YouTube or Instagram or LinkedIn when it was already started, you've missed out on getting a free PDF. So if you scan this code or just follow this very simple URL under the QR code here, you can go to a page where you can download for free the PDF that everybody else got when signing up. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that those of you who signed up, plus you who scan this code, you will be taken to a page where you will get a special bundle that I've collected, where you can get a seat on any future sensory performance for coffee roasters, as we call this. If you're not a coffee roaster, you still it still has a lot of value to get this feedback, but we are focusing on coffee roasters. So a seat on a course like this is 300 euro, regardless if it's on site here in Copenhagen or if it's virtual. But if you follow this link, or if you react on the email that you get after this presentation, you can get the CoffeeMind color palette 3D print file, our scientific publications, and sensory basic e-learning course included in the 300. So it's a bundle where you get some extras on top of the price of the course. And don't worry about dates, because if you just purchase in this with this link, you just get a voucher that you can use for any future sensory performance courses. So if you act now here, you will get a value of 140 euro on top of the 300 euros that you pay for the future course. So if you find it interesting to see how they've got personal and group calibration feedback on universities the last 50 years, you can join our future courses here. So that was actually the last slide. Now we have just Q&A until people start to drop out. So please, if there's anything you didn't agree with, if there are things that you would like to have me kind of explain deeper, please just write in the chat. Okay, so a LinkedIn user would like to know if these panelists had a training before tasting the samples with standards or kits like the Nerdy Cafe, and additionally how the threshold was evaluated. Perhaps these aspects can help explain the variation. So you are right, calibration is the key to good data, but it's not calibration up against universal standards, but it's calibration up against the samples that you are looking at. So the way that the descriptors was chosen was to have a small group of people doing what's called a descriptor development for the session. So here we are basically testing if, let's see here, I'll just see if I have another data set that I can show you. No, it's not there. So you are testing whether people were able to use the descriptors that the descriptor development panel created. So you can see here bitterness, astringency, sweetness, and red berry was not giving any statistically significant differences in the data we created on the PUMA samples. So this could either be because the samples were not different, or it could be that some of the assessors was not correctly calibrated or was deviating too much from the panel average, so they created noise so that the statistic didn't trust the data. And in this case, calibration is the answer, but it's calibration up against the samples. So sometimes l'analyse café is not, for example, if it's florality or if it's, I don't know, any other, it might not have red berry. Or so a sensory scientist would typically go to the supermarket and just get some food substances that they will use for calibration. Because, for example, if it's chocolate, there are hundreds of different types of chocolate. So a sensory scientist would go and get 4, 5, 6 different types of chocolate if they can see that a panel is struggling with chocolatiness up against those samples, because on some samples it might be a milk chocolate or dark chocolate or different types of chocolate that they are struggling with. And then you need to be flexible. So most sensory scientists would just go to the supermarket and get references. But you can also use, if you feel that there's in the Nedi Café or in the Centone set, there are relevant references for a particular sample set, you can use it. But it, as a sensory scientist, you kind of don't have to limit yourself to those chemical reference sets. You can also just go to the supermarket and find something. So Rumi, is the protocol same with typical double-blind clinical trial style? Yes, it is. It's exactly an experiment. So in an experiment, you're doing a prospective data collection based on a random allocation. So yes, it's exactly a prospective randomized clinical trial. It's exactly the same methodology. It's the same type of statistics. Mer is asking if someone has a problem with certain tastes, how do you train them? Well, that will show, right? So in these PMSE plot, we can see per assessor what descriptor they are struggling with, and then we can train them, and then we can see if they are creating better data with that descriptor next time. So that's an individual thing, but you can expose it. And Anas, you ask, have you had any reactions from SCA regarding your critic, or is the CVA too new for them to react? Well, Anas, my impression is that they might even not know, because the last couple of years, of course, I think that we are presenting the most interesting stuff, and SCA think they are presenting the most interesting stuff. So the last 4 years, I haven't had a single presentation at SCA, because the 3 years before, I submitted 3 pieces of work, for example, that was all scientifically published, and it wasn't taken, because it seems like SCA and the university in Zurich here in Europe are really good at kind of just getting the presentations, but that, I don't know. So it might be that they just think that they don't know about this, or they don't care, or they think that he doesn't have any money anyway, so there's no reason to mingle too much with him. But I haven't heard a thing. And at World of Coffee in Copenhagen, I just rented my own room, because I didn't expect to be taken if I proposed a presentation. So I did a lot of presentations there, but there was nobody from SCA. They are probably busy with their own stuff. So I don't know. But it could be interesting to perhaps make a really detailed, open presentation to SCA and ask for some feedback, in which case I would expect it to be ignored, because why waste time? I don't know. I don't know, basically. All right. So any more questions or comments? If not, I think I will just go back to this slide and follow this funnel if you want a free PDF, and if you want to get a seat on a future Central Performance course individually or as a panel. Okay. So at least if you are listening to this and didn't sign up, I wouldn't miss out on the free PDF that you will get by following this QR code. And yeah, we are going to roll this out. So we are going to do a lot of presentations on sensory science, sensory methodology, and a lot of other topics. It's not the only thing we can talk about, but right now it just seems to be a really hot topic. All right, thank you very much for hanging in here with me. And if you want to go back, you can find this presentation. It's on our YouTube channel under live sessions. It is stored as a video that you can rewatch anytime, and you can of course share it with friends and colleagues. So thank you very much, and take care.